The Chicago Bears need to make some serious improvements going into their Week 3 game against the Indianapolis Colts, and the injury situation isn't making that easier.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1. You can follow the podcast at Locked On Bears on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use our promo code LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. On the show today, we look at how the Bears missing practice or being limited at practice could affect the type of improvement we want to see from this team on Sunday against the Indianapolis Colts, mainly in two key areas: the offensive line, where things need to be a lot better for Caleb Williams, and the defensive line, where keeping the Colts one-dimensional and also getting some good pass rush on Anthony Richardson is going to go a long way towards shutting the Colts offense down and then not having to ask Caleb Williams to have to do too much for this offense to hold up their end of the bargain. We'll also look at sort of how the Bears can still find some of that winning formula here with or without the injury situation, but it's not going to make it any easier. Particularly on the offensive line. I think that's the area everyone has been the most focused on since the loss to the Houston Texans, and even coming out of Week 1, the win against the Titans, there were still some real concerns about what that might look like. And so as we go through practice on Wednesday and Thursday, you don't feel great when you see that Tevin Jenkins is DNP on Wednesday and limited on Thursday with a thigh injury. Nate Davis limited on Wednesday and Thursday with a groin injury. So you're not getting two of the most troubled of your offensive linemen so far this season out there getting full repetitions at practice. I mean, on Wednesday it was Matt Pryor filled in at left guard, and Matt Eberflus has said, they're not overly concerned about it. I think there's an expectation that Jenkins and Nate Davis will play. So it's not like we're hitting some sort of disaster here where you have to, you're being forced to make a huge change in your starting lineup against your will. But you're then, even at practice here, not getting the kind of opportunities that you need for that group to build the right amount of cohesion and work on the communication issues that were such a problem against the Texans. Right? It just looks like an offensive line that hasn't spent much time playing together and hasn't spent enough time practicing together. But when Jenkins is out of practice and Nate Davis is limited in practice, they're still not getting that full practice time together to just rep that communication over and over and over again. Practice the passing off of stunts. Practice who's blocking who on the running game and getting to the second level. Like the kind of mistakes that really killed this offensive line against the Texans. Like you want them to be able to be practicing together to work through some of those things just to build that time on task and experience together, as opposed to not getting nearly as much of that opportunity during the week. So then you get back on Sundays, on Sunday, kind of closer to the same place you left the previous Sunday. Like practice is so much of where you get better as a football team and as an individual football player. And Davis and Jenkins being limited at best so far this week is limiting then the kind of progress they can make with the rest of the offensive line. Obviously, it's most important that they play on Sundays. And if limiting them or holding them out of practice gets them more likely and better quality of play on Sunday, like if they can just get as close to healthy as possible by practicing less, that's the higher priority. That's what they should do. I'm not suggesting that they should be forcing them to practice more if they're injured. No, but it doesn't make it any easier when they're not able to go out there. And with both of those guys in particular, there's an injury history there. And so you wonder, okay, it's starting now. Is this going to continue to be a lingering problem, or is this just a little extra bruised up from the loss to the Houston Texans? That's something that has me concerned as we start this injury process with what's a pretty long injury report that the Bears looking at here. Like, I certainly don't think this is a huge factor, but your fullback, Kari Blasingame, has been hurt. He's got multiple injuries, has been a DNP at practice and stuff. If the Bears are trying to really get this running game going against the against the Indianapolis Colts, because the Colts are such a bad run defense, and because the Bears have been so bad at running the ball, like, sure, the fullback is not going to be the reason you run well or don't run well, but having the option to mix in the fullback in some two-back sets and have a lead blocker from the backfield that you trust, like, that's another wrinkle that Shane Waldron could have at his disposal, but the injuries are preventing just how much of that he has at his disposal, with Blasingame now dealing with injury. And then even at the wide receiver position, I think, yeah, okay, that's not going to necessarily affect the running game directly, and maybe not even the offensive line directly, but when we think about wanting to prioritize Caleb Williams' development and just kind of feel like you can get the whole offense going, right? It's not just the offensive line and running game, but the passing game needs to keep doing more and getting better and better. And yep, we have another week where Keenan Allen not practicing with the heel injury. It's a plantar fasciitis type situation in his foot, sort of a pain management situation there. So, like, we're not getting reps of Caleb throwing more to Keenan. Keep trying to work on that timing and that, downfield accuracy as far as pinpoint where you want the ball to go. And then Rome Odunze continues to be limited at practice with I think it was an MCL sprain from week one that he still was able to play through against the Texans. But again, like, being limited at practice can mean a wide range of things, but it definitely means it's not a full set of practice reps. And so, again, for a rookie wide receiver and a rookie quarterback to get that time together on task, to work through routes and work through situations where someone is open or the pass is a little bit higher in that slant in the end zone than maybe Rome would have wanted it to be, and you can work through that kind of stuff at practice so that when you get to the game, you can display that improvement instead of having to try and work through those things on the fly and have your offense maybe suffer a little bit as a result. So that's where it just feels like across the board, you're seeing injuries in the backfield, on the offensive line, at receiver, making it just that much more difficult for the Bears to figure everything out. I still think they should be able to take a big step forward against the Colts regardless. And I think based on last week, like, we're expecting Rome Odunze to play. We're expecting Tevin Jenkins and Nate Davis to play. Maybe Keenan Allen doesn't. Maybe Kari Blasingame doesn't. But, like, the Colts defense has struggled enough that the Bears offense should be able to not only get by, but be better and play well enough to win this game, even without Allen and Blasingame. Now, if you start missing an offensive lineman or two, or if you miss Odunze again, the more you start to subtract from the offense, the less confidence you'll have in them being able to figure things out. And the more this Bears team is going to need to rely on the defense to, corral Anthony Richardson, not let the Colts get big plays off offensively, and keep this Bears offense in the game without making it any kind of shootout or back and forth in that regard. And the defense is dealing with some key injuries of its own, particularly along the defensive line. So we'll look at where that stands, what concerns that might create, and what the Bears need to do in response to this Colts offense next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook. And FanDuel has something a little different for you, but you're running out of time to take advantage of it. Because now through September 22nd, that's this Sunday, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel at any time. All it takes is a $5 bet on anything, any of your favorite sports, or of course, you can bet on Bears Colts, where the Chicago Bears, I believe, remain about a 1.5 point road underdog here. The money line is set at plus 108, so the money's been coming in on Chicago, it sounds like, and the over-under is set at 43.5. So $5 bet on any of those, or any bets of your choosing, and you get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket. Just visit FanDuel.com and download America's #1 sportsbook. This Bears offensive line is dealing with some concerning injuries for a group that needs to get better, and this Bears defensive line is dealing with some injuries that will not, derail this whole defense by any means, but it's something to keep an eye on when, okay, your 2 starting defensive ends are on the injury report, plus one of your key defensive tackles. Like, when we saw this team struggled to stop the run against Tennessee, and you get now Jonathan Taylor and the Colts, and obviously Anthony Richardson is a dynamic athlete at the quarterback position that adds a threat in the running game. Like, this defensive line is going to need to be at its peak, and health-wise, they're definitely not at their peak at the very least. So maybe not too unexpectedly. Defensive tackle Zach Pickens is again working through injury there. He didn't play week 1, was back for week 2, but now missed practice Wednesday and Thursday with a groin injury. And, typically when a guy's been dealing with an injury and he's now missed 2 days in a row of practice, it's not out of the question that he can play on Sunday, but I'm not expecting Zach Pickens to play on Sunday. So that's going to hurt your defensive tackle depth. And it's felt to me like when they've rotated in guys that aren't named Gervon Dexter or Andrew Billings, there's been a significant drop-off at defensive tackle, especially when Pickens isn't out there. You're okay with Dexter and Billings, but they can't play every single snap. But Billings himself, limited with a groin injury Wednesday and Thursday. He's not at 100% right now. And then both of your starting defensive ends, Montez Sweat and DeMarcus Walker, limited at practice on Wednesday and Thursday with their own sets of various injuries. Again, 2 days of limited practice for Billings, Sweat, and Walker. I would expect that they should then, in theory, be able to play on Sunday. It's not that you're going to be missing them entirely, but are they going to be at 100%? Or how close to 100% will they be? Because, by definition, when a player is marked as limited at practice, limited is anything more than 0% practice and less than 100% practice. So, if you miss 1 rep due to injury, technically you're limited. And so not all limited practices are equal. Some guys are limited at practice and really only do some individual stuff on the side, but then don't participate in any team stuff. And some guys are limited at practice, but do almost all the team stuff and are pretty close to full participants, but they're all categorized just as limited. So it's not an equal bucket or blanket identification for how injured or healthy these players might be. Montez Sweat's limited might be different from DeMarcus Walker's limited and Andrew Billings' limited. And their limited on Wednesday might be different than they're limited on Thursday. They could have done more on Wednesday and less on Thursday, or more on Thursday and less on Wednesday. I mean, we just don't, there's not like a measurement of here's what percentage of the practice reps they were able to go for and how the Bears are handling that. So I don't mean to panic per se on the defensive line, only just to say you're going to need these guys firing on all cylinders, because Richardson's going to flee the pocket, especially the defensive ends have to be able to try and contain him or be able to turn and run and pursue him there. DeMarcus Walker also provides a lot of that defensive tackle depth when Zach Pickens isn't out there. They've done a lot all season so far. It's 2 games, but when they go into third downs or second and long situations, they take DeMarcus Walker and play him at defensive tackle and then bring another defensive end on the field, usually Darrell Taylor. That's been their go-to defensive line package, has been 3 defensive ends with Walker at defensive tackle. But if Walker's not 100% and you're missing Pickens, then will he be able to play as many snaps? Are you going to have to rely on guys like Chris Williams and Byron Coward off the practice squad to fill in some of those reps? And I think that's where we've seen the Bears defensive line get into trouble. That's where we've seen them get gashed in the running game. That's where we've seen the pass rush vanish occasionally at times. And that's where it's as you're still trying to figure things out offensively, you don't want to lose anything that you can on the defensive line. That's already comparatively the weakness of this Bears defense, mainly because the secondary and the linebackers are so good, but also the defensive line is still finding its footing and what exactly that's going to look like. I think it's going to be really critical for the Bears to try and shut down Jonathan Taylor a lot of the same ways that they were able to pretty well shut down Joe Mixon against the Houston Texans. Make Anthony Richardson one-dimensional and be able to, try and force him to have to do everything can go a long way. But I do wonder if schematically the matchup will feel a little bit more like the Titans game than the Texans game. We talked about this last week on our Friday podcast, getting ready for game day. And I hope you make it a regular part, because this is where we really get into the goods of game planning, game situation type stuff. But I told you on Friday that I think the Bears would do a good job shutting down Joe Mixon because of the types of run play calls the Texans offense runs. Their run scheme, I think, matched up better for the Bears and worse for the Texans. I was trying to find the words to put that out. The Texans ran a lot of almost purely outside zone, those stretch zone running plays. They run that over and over and over again with Mixon. And the Bears have speed at linebacker that can flow over there, and they got speed on the defensive line. They can move with those stretch zone runs, you're not going to beat them to the edge all that much. Like the Bears are really good at corralling those kind of outside zone runs. But the Titans with Tony Pollard ran a lot more gap scheme runs, power where you're pulling a guard from the backside, or counter where you're pulling two players from the backside, or some of the pin and pull stuff. And and then now moving to the Colts, then it's a little closer to the Titans than the Texans there. All these AFC North or AFC South teams, AFC South teams are just a lot to keep track here. But like the Colts run primarily like up the middle. They're inside zone. They run power. They run counter. With Jonathan Taylor, they really don't stretch you out to the outsides much at all. They keep it largely between the tackles and kind of funnel everything north-south. And it felt like that's what the Bears defense struggled with more against the Titans, as opposed to more of the east-west running that the Texans did. And so it's not that I think Jonathan Taylor's going to have some huge game, but I'm a little skeptical that they'll shut down Jonathan Taylor quite as well as they did Joe Mixon. That doesn't mean he's going to have a great game, but I don't think he's going to have 30 yards like Mixon did last week. Like I think he'll have a moderate game, and the running game can still be a big factor for the Colts here. And then, of course, Anthony Richardson's legs are also a really big factor in that running game as well. But at least this Bears defense has a lot of experience with Caleb Williams being mobile, but obviously then defending Justin Fields in practice for a couple of seasons also helps. A lot of the linebackers and secondary players who were here for a lot of that, and a lot of this defensive line too was a part of that. So Richardson, though, is just a slightly bigger, stronger man to take down. Like Fields is not small, but Richardson is 6'5", 240 or whatever. I mean, he's built like a linebacker or a tight end out there. So it's a different animal, and that's something where the Bears are going to be tested in that regard differently than they were in week 1 and week 2, where Levis and Stroud aren't the slowest quarterbacks in the NFL. They're not Kirk Cousins after the Achilles injury in the pocket. But they're not Anthony Richardson, and they're not Justin Fields. They're not slow, but not fast. And so I just wonder, if it's going to take this defense a little while, especially in week 1, where maybe they come out and have a little bit of a slower start, but then the halftime adjustments that Matt Eberflus makes helps things really settle in the second half, and things start to slow down, and then maybe the offense can start to make some halftime adjustments and get rolling in the second half and get your way to a Chicago Bears victory. Because I do think even with maybe no Keenan Allen, Kari Blasingame, probably not. Zach Pickens, probably not. Like, even with the guys that are going to miss the game and the guys that might not be 100% of the game, I still think the matchup is favorable enough for the Chicago Bears that they can follow kind of the formula the Packers played against the Colts last week, or even the Texans back in week 1 a little bit, and win this game by getting this team back on track. And I kind of want to go through specifically what this looks like for the Bears and sort of what the winning formula looks like in a matchup like this next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by PrizePicks, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. PrizePicks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports because PrizePicks puts you in complete control. It's you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on the stat projections for 2 to 6 players. And if you get your picks right, the money starts rolling in. I put in my prize picks for this week. I think I have more for Caleb Williams because they've got his passing yards for this week set at 1 passing yard. All he needs to do is have more than 1 passing yard, and you get a win with him. That's a promotion they're doing this month, just for the month of September. So this is your last week. Or no, they got one more week, one more Sunday, where you'll have 1 passing yard projected for Caleb Williams in there. I also had Tory Taylor punts inside the 20 to have more than 2 of those in this game. They had stat projections for Cairo Santos as a kicker, DeAndre Swift's rushing yards, DJ Moore's receiving yards, Jonathan Taylor's rushing yards. If you think the Bears defense can make the kind of stops you need to, that's what makes PrizePicks so much fun, because it's not about what anybody else does with their lineup. It's just you versus the stat projections. Download the PrizePicks app today and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONNFL on PrizePicks to get that $50 for just playing $5. You don't even have to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks. Run your game. The Chicago Bears have to run their game to beat the Indianapolis Colts on Sunday. That's going to be, I would say, the most critical aspect of this. Yes, that then comes back to the offensive line needs to run block better, and DeAndre Swift needs to take better advantage of the blocks that he does get from that offensive line. But like the formula for beating the Colts was made pretty clear when the Green Bay Packers did it last week with their backup quarterback. Like Malik Willis was fine in that game for Green Bay, but Malik Willis did not win that game for Green Bay with some great throws. They didn't emerge Malik Willis as some hidden gem backup quarterback that the Packers uncovered that no one else had figured out or whatever. Like he wasn't bad, or he wasn't something special in that game. They ran the ball 50 times against the Colts. Like the Colts could not consistently stop the Green Bay Packers on the ground game. And so if you're the Chicago Bears, run the ball until they stop you. Make them stop you in the ground game. Then you can go to Justin Fields. Wow, that's still ingrained in me because we were talking about Fields earlier. Then you can go to Caleb Williams. But until then, like, run the ball over and over again. Like, Shane Waldron is a little bit more of a pass-happy offensive coordinator, and the analytics will generally tell you that passing is more efficient towards scoring maximum points than running the ball. I think there's more nuance that needs to be applied when we talk about analytics in this, that like short version of this is that analytics assumes the goal is to score as many points as possible. It's like, okay, which of these plays, it's expected points added, right? How are we going to add the most points to our score? And my whole thing is that the goal in the football is not to score the most points. The goal in football is to win. The goal in football is to score one more point than your opponent. And so the goal isn't always necessarily do the play that's going to score me the most points. It's do the plays that's going to get me the win. And so running plays might not have as much expected points added, but you don't need to add more points if you're winning. You know what I mean? Like, you just need to have one more point than the other team. And there's something to be said about not throwing everything on the table to score as many points as possible and putting it all on tape. Like, you want to do as little as possible and still win the game. And that's where running the ball 50 times, if they're not going to stop you, running the ball 50 times is not going to score you as many points as passing the ball 50 times. But if they're not going to stop you running the ball, and running the ball is going to score you more points than the opponent, then that's the better strategy for the Chicago Bears, because then you're not putting those 50 passes on tape for the other team to study the things that really can score you the points when you need them to. And so that's where it's like, do the simplest game plan possible to still win, and then only make it as complicated as you need to, and only open up as much of your offense as you need to in order to win the game. Because the goal is not to score 75 points on the Colts. The goal is to score at least one more point than the Indianapolis Colts. So run the ball. That will help. If they can get the running game going, the offensive line can build some confidence, some cohesion in that regard. And if they run the ball effectively, then pass rushers won't be able to assume the Bears are going to pass over and over again and just tee off on getting upfield after the quarterback. They're going to have to stop and check, run, pass, and not just pin their ears back and go after the quarterback. So that should then help them in pass protection. If you're running the ball well, you can then run more play action off of that effective running game, make it look the same so the defense is guessing even more. Shoot, do we got to stop this pass? Shoot, do we got to stop this run? What's this going to look like? Before they realize it, Caleb's got the ball. He's already halfway through his progression, and things start to open up maybe a little bit more downfield if you freeze the linebackers and underneath coverage players with that play action. Like that, then if you can get more of a vertical passing game going off of some of those play action shots, then the cover, the safeties in the corners end up giving you more space on the deep end. That leaves more space between the deep coverage and the underneath coverage. So it opens up the intermediate game. And all of a sudden you have a running game, a short game, an intermediate game, and a deep game. Your offense is wide open at that point, and it looks more like what we expect the Caleb Williams offense to look like. Defensively, I want to focus on shutting down Jonathan Taylor. We talked about that a little bit already. I'd like to make Anthony Richardson and the Colts offense one-dimensional, because as a group, they just haven't quite been consistent enough. We heard some of that yesterday from Jake Arthur from Locked On Colts. Like, they'll make big plays and then they'll make mistakes, and it's just not quite, everything's not quite dialed in and locked in just yet. And so if you can force them to maybe be trailing a little bit and not have a running game they can lean on, so it's all on Richardson's shoulders. He's got to press, he's got to make a play, he's got to try and do too much. I mean, he'll put balls in harm's way. He's not like horribly reckless, but he is inaccurate sometimes. And I fully expect the Chicago Bears will get their hands on at least one Anthony Richardson pass. I would expect one or two bad passes from Richardson that it will hit Chicago Bears defenders in the hands. So far this season, they've been intercepting them when they hit them in the hands. We'll see. That you can't count on that every single time. I predict the Bears will probably get an interception. They'll certainly have a shot at an interception or two. That was one of my prize picks. I forgot. I got Anthony Richardson more than 0.5 interceptions. I put my PrizePicks money on Anthony Richardson to throw at least one interception in this game. I really think, that he's going to force some things at times in the passing game and that this Bears defense is in a good position to take advantage. I do think there will also be plays in this game where Richardson gets you. He'll hit a big, deep bomb to, Alec Pierce or Michael Pittman or whoever, and he'll beat Tyreek Stevenson or whatever deep for a 40-yard play. And he's going to have one or two of those wow plays where you're just like, whoa, like Anthony Richardson has a ton of talent and he got you there. Like, okay, kudos to him. He got you with that one. And, football's a hard game. You can't shut everybody down all the time. And I think he's going to have one or two big scrambles where it's like, it's 3rd and 7 and the pass rush is getting pressure on him and he escapes the sack and takes off for a first down where you really feel like, oh, you should have had him right there. Should have forced him into a punt in that situation. But the play with his legs and his strength and speed was enough to get a first down on a play where you really thought you had things shut down. Like, I think Richardson's going to have a couple of those plays that are really frustrating for the Bears defense, but they'll get him back on an interception or two to make up for it and ultimately still hold this Colts team down under 20 points and give the Bears offense, a ample opportunity to win this game if they can do all the things we talked about earlier offensively. I will say, don't expect special teams to be a big factor this week, at least not in terms of the return games being a big factor this week. The Colts special teams have been excellent at not even giving you the chance to return the ball. So far, every kickoff the Colts have done this year have been touchbacks. They have not given a kickoff returner a chance to return a ball. They did one onside kick that was recovered by the other team, so that counts as a kick return, but they have not kicked it deep and had that return man take anything out. They just boot it away and say, not going to mess with that, take your touchback, go to the 20. In the punting game, Colts have punted 6 times. I think it's 3 fair catches, 1 down, 1 touchback. They've had 1 punt returner attempt to return a punt, and he was tackled for no gain. The return game has just not been a factor against the Indianapolis Colts so far. So, I'm not expecting DeAndre Carter to have some big return that springs things open. I do expect, though, that their punter, Rigoberto Sanchez, is excellent. Torrey Taylor is excellent. And we may see some field position battling here where they'll both boot it and try and flip the field. And they've been really good at pinning teams inside the 20 on punts. I mean, Torrey Taylor has 2, but Rigoberto Sanchez, I think Sanchez has punted 6 times. I think 5 of them have landed inside the 20. And I think Torrey Taylor's was 8 total punts, 6 in the 20, or 7 total punts and 5 in the 20. They both have been really good at pinning the other teams back and flipping the field. So, special teams will be a factor only insofar as they've got good punters and good kickers, but the return game, that's probably the better way to say it. The return game, I don't expect to be a factor all that much in this game. So you can't count on that big special teams play to bail out your offense if the offense is struggling. You can count on that turnover. I think we're going to get at least 1 turnover in this game, and that's going to be the gift that the defense can give the offense when they really need it. But Caleb Williams and Shane Waldron and this offensive line and DeAndre Swift, they got to bring it this week. This is the most favorable matchup they will have faced against the defense so far. This is go time. Show us some progress, knock off some of that rust and some of those rookie mistakes, and get dialed in against a team that's defense should facilitate your offense being closer to what we expected it to look like. Not going to be a perfect game by any means. It's not going to be 400 yards and 5 touchdowns from Caleb Williams. I don't think that's realistic to expect. But can we get to 200, 250 and a touchdown or 2 on offense? Can we get to 20 points as an offense? Just some baby steps here to get things rolling. That would be a great. I think I said 20-16 as a final score on Crossover Thursday yesterday. That would be a great step forward against a team like the Colts. Win, lose, or hopefully not tie. We'll break down the results for you right here on the Locked On Bears podcast. So make sure you hit the subscribe button. Whether you're watching on the Locked On Bears YouTube channel or listening on your favorite podcast app, that's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If you're looking for a second listen, now that we're wrapping up Locked On Bears, go check out Locked On NFL, now with 2 shows every day. First, it's the madman Tyler Rowland, kicking off your morning with a double shot of NFL espresso. And then you can stop by the barber shop with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk alongside our Locked On NFL experts and our local experts covering every single team. So go check that out. Coming back Monday for another Locked On Bears and another opportunity to bear down.